Welcome to the Scottish Business Network podcast.
Hi everyone. I'd like to introduce Stephen O'Donnell. Stephen, I'm delighted you can join the big SBN interview today. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Ewan. It's a delight being here.
So listen, to kick off, I'd like to just ask you, what's your story? For anyone who's not met you, for anyone who doesn't know you, tell me a bit about yourself, Stephen.
I was born at the beginning of the space age in 1957. That's when Sputnik did an orbit of the Earth and woke the world up.
You carry it well, sir.
Do I really? Okay. Well, I try. So Sputnik was circumnavigated the Earth, the first man-made object ever to go into space. And it woke the world up, and it was the dawning of the modern era. Because when I was a child, we didn't have a TV, we didn't have a car, we had an outside toilet, and we lived in actually very modest circumstances in central Edinburgh, in Leith. And my father was a joiner. My mother was a housewife. And as I grew up, we moved out of Edinburgh. We went to West Lothian. And those of you who know Scotland know that West Lothian is to the west of Edinburgh, and Edinburgh is in Lothian region. So I lived in a wee village called Uphall, which is near Livingston and Linlithgow and Bathgate. Those are the big towns around there. And I went to school in Bathgate. Still very modest. Eventually we got a car and we got a black and white TV. And I remember we went from just having one channel to having two channels. And then we had three channels. And now I don't know how many channels we've got. It's impossible to count them all because you can get them all off the internet. But we didn't have a telephone, and then we got a telephone, and we had a shared line between our neighbours and ourselves, because that was the way. We had a party line because there weren't enough circuits. And if your neighbour was using the phone, you couldn't use it. And if you were using the phone, they couldn't use it. And now everybody's got their own phone. So things have changed an awful lot since my youth. And my memories of Scotland are actually predominantly about the great outdoors, because when I wasn't going to school, I got up when the sun came up and I went out with my pals and we went fishing and we went clambering over the hills and through the woods and across the fields until it became so dark that we actually sometimes couldn't find our way home. And my parents, particularly my mother, used to worry about where I was. But that never stopped me going off and rambling about. So I remember the Scottish countryside, and my goodness, it's a sight to behold. I don't think there's another place in the world that's as beautiful as Scotland.
An Englishman actually that he ran a sort of falconry, a tourist falconry trip in the middle of Perthshire. He once said to me, he said, "Ewan, Scotland would be the most beautiful country in the world if it wasn't for the weather." He said, when it shines, it's spectacular. And I said, well, the weather's a part of it. It adds to the mystique and the beauty of it.
Well, you've missed another component. It's the midges as well.
I was just going to say the midges. If it wasn't for the midges, yeah.
It's either raining or you're getting eaten alive. So those of you who have never been to Scotland, don't let that put you off. It is an incredibly beautiful place. It's absolutely unique. And it's a very large part of the UK, and it's very underpopulated. So there's a lot of open land and places to go rambling and climbing and fishing and all the things that people like to do in the outdoors.
And Stephen, I was going to ask you, what's your fondest memories from your childhood in Scotland?
Oh, I've got lots of them.
Yeah, give me one. Give me the highlight.
I think my fondest memory was going guddling for a trout. Now, guddling is tickling for a trout. I had no no fishing rod or anything of the sort. So you go under a rock and you tickle, you find a trout and you pull it out and you take it home for dinner. And I remember the first time I actually found a trout under a rock and I brought it out and put it in a pail and took it home. I was so pleased. I'll never forget the feeling that was of an achievement. I'd actually learned how to guddle trout.
Wow, that's impressive. And was it a minnow or was it a
No,
beast? Was it a monster of the deep?
It was a brown trout, and I was a wee boy at the time, so it was enormous as far as I was concerned. But it was just a normal trout size, a sort of normal, fully grown trout that you'd buy from the fishmongers nowadays.
Ah, fantastic. Jeez, that's impressive. And in terms of your favourite place in Scotland then, where's that?
Well, I really like Edinburgh. I think Edinburgh is unique because it's got a blend of the Georgian piece in the new town, and then it's got the medieval piece on the Royal Mile, running down from the castle down to the Holyrood Palace. The cobbled streets and the narrow alleyways and the little doorways that have been there for centuries and never changed really. And the architecture is just amazing.
It hurts a Glaswegian to admit it, but it is a bonny city. It's fantastic. I always say to people in Dublin, I always say, you know, if you were going on a city break to Scotland, I'd send you to Edinburgh, but I'd take you to Glasgow. I always think I could show them a better time if I took them to Glasgow. But you sort of need to know where you're going. Whereas, you know, Edinburgh, you can just say, fly to Edinburgh, walk around, you'll love it.
And you got the trams nowadays, which is fantastic. That's changed the culture and changed the way of getting around in the town. The other thing about Edinburgh is it's a place you can walk. You don't need a car. You don't need any form of transport. You can walk from one side to the other and see all the important things on your two legs. And that makes it really accessible. And the bus service isn't too bad either. From St Andrew's Square, if I remember correctly, that's the main bus station.
And I'd like to move on to your business career, but the last Scottish-related question for now, what's your favourite Scottish word or phrase?
Dreich.
Dreich.
Shall I explain what dreich means to those that don't know?
Please do. What is it? Onomatopoeia at its best.
It describes the damp, drizzly weather that we faced with in Scotland, and it's a gay dreich day, which means it's a very drizzly, miserable day. And so a dreich, I think, is the most descriptive word I've ever come across in any language.
Yes, I also do like your use of the guddling for trout as well. I think that's certainly got Scottish connotations to it. I definitely don't think that's a phrase that would be used south of the border. Well,
I don't know. You might have heard of guddling about. I think that is a much more wider expression, but guddling for trout, maybe it is a Scottish expression. I don't really know. Maybe someone could help us out and tell us.
Yes.
For one, I'd be
Enter
very
and
interested.
Yes. Okay. So let's move on to your business career. You've got pretty much every C-suite title, or experience under your belt. CIO, COO, CTO, CEO, board advisor, private equity experience. Just like multi-sectoral experience in so many different sectors. It would take up the rest of the time of the podcast to list them all out. Harvard qualification, AI leadership, a recently appointed Cambridge Building Society non-exec director. Cambridge Building Society's 2 billion odd in terms of turnover. So like a fantastic career. So just maybe pick out a few highlights, career highlights for us, Stephen, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I'm a bit of an opportunist, I think. That's the way to put it. And one thing I've learned is that being a Renaissance man, that is, or a woman for that matter, so being a Renaissance person is a really powerful thing, because what it means is that you've got skills in multiple areas. And that is incredibly useful, because you can enter any circumstance. And because you've got wide skills across the wide knowledge and experience, you can go into that problem, that issue, that thing that you've got to resolve. And you've got the experience from multiple different sectors, and you can join them together. So I started off my career, I wanted to be an engineer. I'd always wanted to be an engineer. When I was a child, I told you, my father was a carpenter, and he had loads of buddies in the building trade, but he didn't have a buddy who was an electrician. And he needed to put in a new central heating system. So his best friend came along and fitted all the pipes in the boiler and stuff, but he couldn't wire it up. And at 12 years old, I wired up the central heating system.
I was going to say, yeah.
I did.
As in plumbing or the electrics?
The electrics. So I wired it into the mains circuit board, and I can tell you that 35 years later, it was still working. And it was perfectly safe. I obeyed all the building regulations. And
please don't try this at home, folks.
No. But, if you're short of a bit of money and, you're in the building trade, your 12-year-old son or daughter might be a good addition to the installation of something electrical. There you go.
No, Steve, intervention. I can see the lawsuits.
You're probably right. But anyway, so that really, and I loved Lego, and I loved Meccano. I don't know if any of you remember Meccano with nuts and bolts. Much better than Lego, frankly. You could do much more interesting things with it. And so I did quite well at school. Went to university, studied engineering, electrical engineering, and when I came out, I actually decided to go and work for a company in Bathgate. And what they did was they made mainframe computer components. So it was terminals and all sorts of other things. Really complicated stuff.
What year would this have been, Stephen?
It would be in the late 1970s.
All right. So just, right at the sort of start of that evolution, computer evolution into the 80s.
Yeah, when I was at Heriot-Watt, we had a mainframe computer, and I learned how to program in Fortran, which many people will never have heard of. It was the formula translation language. It was invented by IBM, and it basically was for engineers and scientists who wanted to do calculations, and it was really powerful. So I was in the computer industry from the birth of the computer industry. I then went to work for Marconi Space and Defence, and I worked on some of the most expensive computer games that you ever come across in your life. So the Sea Harrier simulator, which was and the Nimrod anti-submarine warfare airplane. So I was working on simulators, and these were just big toys, So you get an Air Force pilot getting into the thing, or a radar operator, and you would simulate a real life situation, finding a submarine and all the sorts of things that you would do. And then after that, I continued my engineering career, and I went to work in Glenrothes for another Scottish company called Rodine, and they were a really amazing business. They'd come out of Burroughs, again in Glenrothes. Burroughs were making discs in Scotland, and IBM at the time were making computers in Greenock. So there was a big computer manufacturing base in Scotland that there isn't so much of anymore. It seems to have drifted away, and much of the manufacturing's gone to places with perhaps better tax regimes or lower costs.
Yeah, it used to be Silicon Glen for a while, didn't it? I don't know if that
Absolutely.
title still sticks, but
well, it should do, because we've still got fantastic skilled people. You know, we've got the Rosyth Dockyard with an amazing nuclear capability. You know, and so we are right in the midst of great engineering. The oil industry, the renewables industry. There's a whole series of different of different engineering stuff that's going on in Scotland. So, Scottish engineer, and at the time I was living in Livingston, and we had the car plant at Bathgate, the British Leyland Trucks, and it shut down. And we had Plessy capacitors again in Bathgate, and it shut down. And tens of thousands of men and women were thrown on the streets. And we had an absolutely appalling depression. Shops boarded up, people out of work, and it was really sad. I'm glad to see that it's changed now. And a lot of the stuff that happened in the Livingston area, the Livingston Development Corporation, managed to build up new industries that took over for some of these older industries. But at the time, it was really depressing, and I decided that it was time to move. And I packed the car up, took far too many pullovers, and drove down to London. And didn't have a job. Landed in London on a Monday, and by the Thursday, I was actually in a company working as an engineer. So the streets were paved with gold, and I got a really well-paid job in a company car, and I was absolutely delighted. And I sort of built my way up from there. This is a company that wrote computer software, and we wrote software for things like steel stockholders and builders merchants and taxi companies. In fact, we developed software that's very like the software that Uber put out in the market as their transport platform. But we did it decades ago in order to control motorcycles and taxis for the biggest taxi company in London. And then after that, I just moved on, continuing to be an engineer until I decided that actually I was going to be a better salesman than an engineer. And the company I was working for appointed me as a salesman, and I went out and sold technology.
How did you decide that? Like, you know, how did you come by that transition? Because that's quite a big change.
It wasn't really. It was quite an easy shift, because the sales guys would go out and talk to the customers, and if they were selling technical products, they would bring one of the lads with them, and I was one of the lads. I was the engineer, and I always thought the salespeople were absolutely clueless. They didn't know the products very well, and actually they weren't very good at managing the customers. So I found I was better than most of the salespeople. Maybe I'm being arrogant and so on, but.
So you were selling to someone of a technical mindset, and you were communicating in a technical language that made sense with them. So maybe the salesperson was, you know, sitting there with dollar signs in their eyes rather than giving them the technical spec that the customer was looking for.
They were focused on getting an order, and I was focused on solving the customer's problem. And brilliant. You know, this is a life lesson. It took a long time for me to learn it, but it's a really, really important life lesson. If you want to sell something, find a problem and then solve it. Because customers hate being sold to. If you think about it, do you like being sold to? Nobody likes being sold to. But if you're somebody who comes along and solves your problem, that's a completely different thing. And it's a really successful approach to making sales work for you.
I used to be CFO for Virgin Media here in Ireland, and we had this sales person that I got to know well as a friend, and I said to him, we went on a kayaking trip a couple of years ago, and I said to him, Cormac, you have to tell me your secret sauce. You know, year after year, I was brought into meetings to discuss your commission plan, and basically we were paying you almost too much, you know. But for me as CFO, it wasn't too much if you were bringing in new business. I was quite happy to write the check. But you know, what's the secret sauce? And he said just that. He said, Ewan, there is no secret sauce, and that's the point. I always just look to understand customer problems, what the problem was, what kept them up at night, and I'd deliver a solution that met that problem. And you know, I'd sit on it and sit in the delivery guys, the implementation team, to make sure the customer got exactly what they wanted that solved their problem. And he said after that, you know, repeat business just kept coming back to me.
That's right. And the thing is that when you've got your customer phoning you up about things that you don't sell, asking for your advice, that's when you know that you've actually won that customer. And you should always help them. So if a customer comes along and says, well, have you got one of these? Can you do this for me? And you say, no, well, you know what? It's not a real sweet spot, but let me introduce you to Ewan. He does that sort of stuff, and I'm pretty sure if he can't solve it for you himself, he'll know someone who can. And getting that level of trust and engagement where you are seen as part of the solution rather than part of the problem is a real big step. So that's a serious life lesson. And if people recognise that, they'll all be good salespeople.
Brilliant. Well, we'll bank that as a bit of wisdom from you, Stephen. And then, so tell me, so you moved into a sales role, and then, you know, from then, you know, where did that bring you up to your current role?
Right after that, we managed to do an IPO in the company I was selling for. We went on something called the over-the-counter market in London, which is no longer the case. It's now called the unlisted securities market. But nevertheless, it was my first, second actually, sort of cash transaction as a result of a company going public. Rodine also went public. But Newton's Computers, which was the company I was talking about, they went public on the over-the-counter market, and I made a few bob, which was really helpful. After that, I did a few other entrepreneurial things, including built a factory that's assembling personal computers and sold personal computers, the components coming in from Taiwan.
Alan Sugar, eat your heart out.
It was small scale, made money at the time, but eventually I didn't have enough capital to really go for it at scale. I then went off and built a consulting business. And one of the first deals that we did was we won the merger between Pricewaterhouse and Coopers and Lybrand. That was to run the merger, big program management piece. So there was a bit of engineering, technical stuff, but a whole lot of stakeholder engagement and management. And I ran the implementation of that.
Wow, that's huge.
Flipped that business to PwC at the end of it, and then moved on. And I then got into, I worked for Deutsche Bank. I ran the front office for Deutsche Bank, technology front office for Deutsche Bank. So that means the trading floors, where all of the transactions were going on, with extremely high paid fixed income and equities traders who were quite likely to throw the screen at you if you made a mistake. Very, very short-tempered.
Well, these boys and girls tend to have quite a few screens to throw. Like these days, I've been into trading. They've got about 12 screens, so they've probably got one or two to spare to throw at you, Stephen.
They've also got egos the size of a small planet. But it was fun. So I worked at Deutsche Bank for a while. I worked at Lehman Brothers before it went well before it went bust. A really interesting and highly innovative company, actually. So I worked in the financial services sector. And then after that, I went to work for Cable and Wireless, doing a huge insource from IBM, which was very interesting. And I got headhunted out of there to go to BT, and ended up being the global head of operations at BT, running all the data centers around the world, and the largest operations bridge in Europe. So it's a pretty big job. I think I had about 3,500 people working for me overall, which was quite significant.
That's a good staff party right there.
It certainly was. It was fun as well. Very, very good fun. After that, I went into private equity. I worked for KKR, called Kohlberg, Kravis and Roberts. They bought a card processing business called First Data Corporation, and I ran IT in Europe for them. And then moved on through the financial services sector, and eventually ended up as the CIO for Coventry Building Society, Arthur Gallagher, and MS Amlin, another insurance broker, and G4S, the second biggest employer in the world, which is quite an interesting statistic.
Really? Group 4 Security?
They're not called Group 4 Security, they're called G4S now, but you're right.
Yeah. Formerly, sorry, I shouldn't say formerly Group 4 Security, just in case anyone didn't know the G4S. Yeah.
So they got manned security, utility services, reading meters and fitting smart meters and things like that. So I got really involved in that very interesting business, and got to be a CIO, and then started investing in small businesses, formed a business called DCMI that was to do with migrating computers between data centers or data centers in the cloud. That took off. We made a huge numbers of sales, and I did a trade sale on that business to an American firm called Glasshouse, who then sold the technology onto Cisco. So some of the technology that I invented was ended up with Cisco. So really, really interesting stuff. And after that, I've just been doing things that interest me. And
that's an incredible background. Like incredible, all the different sectors and industries and roles, and the transition as well is interesting between all the different skills that you have and expertise, engineer to sales to sort of technology and IT focused roles.
I've always done the same job. Doesn't matter, because I've always thought of myself as a paratrooper. That is, there's a problem, and I'll go in and I'll solve it, and lead the charge to get a team to come together and actually solve the problem. So at Cable and Wireless, there was a real demand to reduce costs. So I took hundreds of millions of pounds out of costs by simplifying the way the business operated. And at BT, I convinced the board that they needed to invest in data centres and in broadband, and the whole thing really took off. And BT were really quite successful after we'd made that transition. So I've always been this problem solver, and thinking about things, and always, this is another life lesson, I've always tried to surround myself with people who are smarter than me. And
I never have an issue with that myself for some reason.
Nor have I. So I find, I always try and take things to extremes. So I like to have professors as buddies. And if you've got professors as buddies, you really get some quite interesting stuff, and it helps you to learn about new stuff, particularly professors that are doing things that are different from you. So one of my professor buddies is an archaeologist, and so I learned all about Stonehenge from him. Went down with a trowel and did some digging down there and found some stuff, which was really interesting.
Oh, really? Wow. What stuff did you find?
Well, overall, we found a whole load of flint tools, 8,000 and 9,000 years old, from just after the last ice age. Bones, dog bones, things that came from Scotland, okay, and some of the most exquisite arrowheads and axes, and from the people who were there before Stonehenge, through Woodhenge, and into the modern era, when society was moving from being nomads and hunter-gatherers into being agrarians. So it's the Neolithic type era. So it was really, really interesting. I learned a ton, and I could talk for hours about archaeology, even though I've never made a career out of it. I'm just interested. And I think
you're never, there's no time like the present to start, Stephen. It sounds like you could add that to your CPS, your chief problem solver credentials.
Yeah, I haven't got the time right now, but so most recently I've moved into a bit of a fractional career because I'm quite old, and I need to think about paying something back. So the Scottish Business Network was one of my ways of trying to pay back my homeland. And,
so tell me about that role. You've started in the sort of chief operating officer, working with Russell Dalgleish and the team at SBN. What does that involve, and what do you envisage for SBN?
Right. Okay. So SBN is an incredible organisation. It's got the most amazing reach. If we think about it, the Irish, the Welsh, and the Scots have got a really tight culture. The English, not so much. Maybe because it's so regional, and Londoners and Yorkshire people are so different, chalk and cheese, whilst we in Scotland, we've got a common culture. It doesn't matter whether you live in the Highlands or the Lowlands or the Borders or even the islands. We are Scottish, and we feel Scottish, and we wear kilts and do burn suppers and things like that. So we've got cohesion. And the other thing is that Scots, for centuries, have been migrating around the world. So there's an enormous Scottish diaspora, same as there's an enormous Irish diaspora. So we've got this group, and Russell has done amazing things with it. But he's only one chap, and I've always got a great team helping him with this. I felt it needed a bit more organisation, a bit more structure, a bit more, better ways of working, so that we could be more effective, so that we could actually raise some money and do more good. So a few things that I've been doing, leading a Burns Supper in Scotland, charitable event to help Ukraine, to help the children who've been abducted by the Russian aggressors, and help them to settle back into a life, because basically the Russians had been stealing kids from their families and trying to brainwash them to lose their Ukrainian identity. And you can imagine the trauma that's caused to them. So that's something that was, very Scottish thing to do, I think.
Yeah. No, listen, fantastic and very commendable.
Really successful event. So if you're in London, 25th or maybe the 26th of January 2026, I'll expect to see you at the SBN Burns Supper. And
I do tend to throw myself about into quite a few Burns Suppers, Stephen. So certainly the Scottish Government do a fantastic one here in Dublin, and I have an annual lads trip actually. We catch up and we always do a Burns Supper together. But I'll look into that and see if I can make it across.
I also I do some consulting for the CFA, which is for investment professionals. It's a membership organisation leading a digitisation of their membership, and the Cambridge Building Society, where I'm an independent non-exec director, and I act as an advisor for a number of technology companies. I'm a non-exec for a US public company based in Utah, that does cybersecurity. I've got a real interest in cybersecurity. So, my Renaissance engineer thing has been really useful because I'm able to work in financial services, dealing with, investments of £2 billion and working out how to use that money for the good of the local community to help, young people get on the housing ladder and buy houses, because that's what building society is about. They're mutuals. They're about helping people. And so I think this part of my career is very much about how can I help others rather than just build my career.
Do you ever get a chance to sleep, Stephen?
I do, but as you get older, you recognise that sleeping is a waste of time, and so you and you don't need quite so much, I don't think, either. So.
Well, listen, we were talking about the Scottish Business Network, and what, like, in terms of your role there, where do you think we can take it? What's the limit, or what's the vision that you see for the Scottish Business Network to continue to expand it globally?
Right. Well, I think we've obviously got a willing audience, and Scottish people who've spread around the world actually tend to be quite successful. I don't know if you've noticed that, but you don't. I think we find a few Scottish down and outs in London, but not too many, largely because of the alcohol problems. But mainly, our Scottish diaspora has done really well as they've moved around the world.
I'm feeling pressure now. I'll need to up my game over here in Dublin.
Well, I think you should, but it's always a good idea to up your game anyway. But I think the opportunities for international trade between the homeland and the rest of the world are really there for the grasping. We've got willing customers and willing helpers across the world, and we've got great businesses in Scotland with great products, internationally renowned products, and how can we help each other by making good trade between Scotland and the Scottish diaspora and the people around them? So there's the first opportunity. I think that the second opportunity is that Scotland is an engineering nation. We think about Scotland, we think about engineers and doctors, and pharmaceuticals and all sorts of things. We're a pretty smart bunch. Scottish accountants are famous, so we've got this professional services, the insurance, the banking. We need to be thinking about how we can help to build Scotland and make it, as we all know, better than England. So there you go.
And I can't let you go without tapping into some of your wisdom. So what would Stephen O'Donnell tell a younger Stephen O'Donnell? What advice would he give them?
That's a really interesting question. I think you achieve the level of your expectations. So if you're a wee ragged-assed Scottish laddie running around the countryside, and your father's a joiner, your expectations are maybe you'll be an electrician. Think beyond that, because you can achieve anything you want to achieve.
So it's that classic Henry Ford quote: "If you think you can or can't, you're right."
That's right, exactly so. And give it a go. Okay?
And what's the best advice that you can recall being given, Stephen? Has anyone took you under the wing at some stage and given you the team talk that's really made a difference in your career?
I think so. It's if you can help someone, help them. Don't hold back. And it's helped me in. It's helped me a huge amount through my career. So you make friends, you do people favours, you help them out, and it's crazy because before you know it, everybody wants to help you too. It's a real virtuous circle. So stop being grasping, stop being greedy, stop being selfish. Actually, follow the Scottish culture and be open-handed and help others. Play it forward. Don't expect to get anything back, but actually you'll get more back than you could possibly imagine.
Well, even that dopamine hit from just helping others is a lot, isn't it? You know,
It
that
is.
feeling good about yourself and your own sort of personal integrity and belief system.
I think I'll maybe be accused of being sexist here, but it's a very male thing as well. I think we men are programmed to be helpful, and so I'm sure that's true of Scottish women too. But I certainly feel that it's my natural way to be, and anything else is unnatural. And I think it just makes you bitter and twisted. That's another
bitter and twisted if you don't. Head.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah,
if you're grasping and not open-handed and generous.
Well, listen, we definitely need a lot more of that mindset out there in the world today. Anyway, like the more that I wish I could send that messaging globally to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Okay, so just to finish up, then I like to ask a few quickfire questions. What's your favourite book or podcast?
Oh, okay. My favourite book, it's very old and it's science fiction. It's called The Sheep.
Sorry, Stephen, could you repeat that? You broke up there. Sorry, what's your favourite book or podcast, Stephen?
My favourite book is a science fiction novel from a long time ago. It's called The Sheep Look Up. Someone calling me, please excuse me. Yeah, it's called The Sheep Look Up. It's an amazing book, and it's a dystopian story about a world that's so polluted that humanity can't live in it anymore. And it's actually, I think, it was really prescient. It's really predicted where we are now with. I
was going to say we're doing our best to achieve that goal, aren't we?
Yes, and this book is must be 50 years old, 40 right. Or 50 years old. It's definitely worth the read, and they got it slightly wrong because it's really close to what's been happening recently with climate crisis and pollution and plastics in the ocean and so on, and food that you can't eat anymore because it's not fit for human consumption. So it's an amazing book. I recommend it to anyone, and it's kind of life-changing. Once you've read it, you think, my God, it's like 1984, predicting fascism and the things like Vladimir Putin and so on.
Right. Wow. Jeez. Your favourite quote? Do you have any favourite quotes out there?
A man's a man for all that, from Robbie Burns.
Yeah, Robbie Burns.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, finally, the best advice that you've received. I think you've given me that, haven't you?
I've given you a few of those, but be true to yourself.
Great.
That's a pretty wide thing to say, but it's true. Be true to yourself, because if you're not true to yourself, you'll never achieve anything.
Well, listen, with that wisdom, that's a good place to end. Thank you so much. If anyone wants to reach out and contact you, Stephen, are you on LinkedIn? Are you out there?
Yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to find me. I'm Steve or Stephen O'Donnell. You'll find me if you look for Cambridge Building Society and Stephen O'Donnell. I'll be there.
Well, listen, keep doing what you do, keep spreading the wisdom, and keep being a chief problem solver. I think that's the best C-suite title out there. So, but listen, thanks. I love your genuineness and authenticity as a business leader, and particularly admirable that social integrity and the desire to give back. I think is so powerful, and that, as you say, it links a lot of Scots together as well. Certainly, I know from speaking to Russell Dalgleish so many times, that's always his mantra in terms of how can we help, how can we give back. So I love that about the Scottish Business Network. So it's great to have you step in as COO as well as all your other interests. But thanks for your time so much, Stephen.
Thank you, Ewan. Lovely to speak to you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.